Thor Ragnarok was pretty damn lit, my dudes. But their Funko Pops look dope as well. Look how tiny Hulk is. Links in the description for these things, and show your true love for the Ragnarokening. Yo, is that even a word? Thor Ragnarok is the third film about the God of Thunder in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And I'm gonna be straight up with you, this movie blew me away. I feel like I'm always being redundant in the beginning of all my videos when I say this, but if you have trouble reading the text below the video playing in front of you right now, this is a spoiler review. So if you didn't want to know anything about Thor killing Hulk, then you should probably click away. See? I'm always looking out for you. Someone could have spoiled it and you would have blamed me for it. Thor Ragnarok sees the return of Thor, one of the strongest Avengers who we haven't seen since Age of Ultron, which was in 2015. Unless that was like in some other year because of that whole Spidey Homecoming 8 years later BS title card. So the Asgardian god, or demigod, or prince, whichever doesn't get me demonetized to be honest, meets with Hulk to take on the goddess of death herself. But them two alone ain't gonna cut it. So what they do? The only reasonable thing actually. Yup, he gets one of them F-boy haircuts, seduces his own brother, and recruits a new whammon into their Overwatch clan. Not gonna lie to you, 3 years ago, if you told me Thor was having a third movie in 2017, I probably wouldn't have cared all too much. I mean, I liked him, and I love Hemsworth in the role, but the character of Thor in the MCU is essentially the vanilla of ice cream. You got your strawberry and Iron Man, rainbow sherbet and Cap, mint and chocolate chip and Hulk, and then you got the blandest of them all sitting in the corner over here. If you like vanilla, then hey, good for you. As for me, I actually really love vanilla, so this was a terrible simile, my bad. What I mean is that, though he's probably one of the stronger Avengers, he really was the least interesting among them. That was prior to this movie. Cause man, the director Taika Waititi really knocked this one out of the park. Let me put it this way, the Thor franchise is like that food you're trying to heat up in the middle of the night, and Taika Waititi is you opening up the microwave at the last second. Saving Thor from a horrible confrontation with Cranky Everybody's up at the ass crack of dawn. Chris Hemsworth this time around was much more likable as Thor, and I didn't even think that was possible. The only reason why I was invested in Thor, despite the boringness that encompasses his character in the movies, was because of him. But highlighting that inner Drax type of character within really made him a better developed character. He nails every line of dialogue and improv scene thrown at him. It took me a while to get myself fixated on this new mood they were rolling with Thor. You saw a little bit of this new turn in Age of Ultron, but they really played up on that knowing his origin is so damn weird vibe. It's such a new feeling to watch an MCU film at this point in the game, where we're having other superheroes show up in other non-Avengers films seamlessly. Mark Ruffalo was a great addition to this cast, both as Hulk and Bruce Banner. They didn't use him as much as I thought they'd use him. I mean, all of their ads promoting this film was building up to that big grand WWE Extreme Rules match between Thor and Hulk. But even so, the dude was perfect on his comedic timing. I know he didn't really have to do much for this part, but that one scene where he just jumped out of Valkyrie's ship and just flopped like a dead-ass fish on the bridge had my theater dying. Speaking of other fellow members of the Avengers showing up in this movie, this next thing I have to say has nothing to do with that. Seeing Tom Hiddleston back as Loki just gave me nostalgic feels. That cliffhanger ending of that one Thor film that most people look down upon has probably been the longest problem I've been waiting to see be resolved in this franchise. It's literally been 4 years since he first posed as Odin on the throne. Throughout those years, I always wondered if Thor ever found out. We all find out that this boy had him fooled for 4 whole years. How stoned do you gotta be to not realize that things were a little odd about yo daddy? I get that you never returned home or whatever, but wow, not even a warning from his 4 best pals. 3 of which get about 2 seconds of screen time, but more on them later though. The introduction to Tessa Thompson's Valkyrie was something that I thought could have easily ended up bum-rushed, but totally worked out in the end. But the way that flashback sequence hit her like a truck when she fought Loki was just beautiful. Her story is really one of a tragedy. She saw every one of her friends die in front of her, and you could feel the impact of loss in the actress's eyes. It was heartbreaking. More heartbreaking than when you first got that red ring of death on your 360. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. On the topic of the director, Taika Waititi also played Korg, and he was by far one of the best characters introduced in the Thor series. The fact that he's basically built like a monstrous mongoloid, and that his voice is as soft as Chaozu from DBZ just sold it for me. Jeff Goldblum did a pretty good job as the Grand Master. He added the perfect amount of Goldblumness that made the character charismatic, but not so much that made him too annoying. And finally, Cate Blanchett's performance as Hela is the pure definition of utter perfection. I know there are a lot of people who say that her character, not the actor herself, but the character of Hela was sort of one-dimensional and that she kinda served as an exposition device at times, which I can see where they're coming from. But if anyone else had been cast in this role, I'm pretty sure I would have walked out of this film disappointed. She chewed up every scene she was in. She for real has the ideal bassy voice for the goddess of death. The filmmakers really emphasized her powerfulness and how unstoppable she was by how she tanked swords through the stomach and just plucked them out like loose toenails. There are more characters in this film I'll get into in a bit, but first let's talk about the action in this film. That segment where Hela takes on the entire Asgardian army and does some spam bot 75 hit combos had the audience's eyes and my eyes glued to the screen. Oh yeah, and she brutally murdered the Warriors 3. Volstagg, played by that Ray Stevenson person who was also the Punisher a while back, ate horseshoes with the guy who just got cast as Shazam in the DCEU. Yes, Zack don't gotta worry about those scheduling conflicts anymore though. At least they had the guts to kill off the minority last and the white dudes first. They got balls to be that progressive, son. Sif was nowhere to be seen throughout, even though she was originally supposed to show up. I've heard that's because of the actress's scheduling conflicts. So I guess her character could still be alive, just banished into another dimension, or maybe she took an off day for vacay. And I also gotta add that it was such a tragedy that just when the hammer was looking cool, it got shattered. Like legit, looking back at all of the Marvel films with Thor, it was usually just the same movement with the thing. Square, square, triangle, square, triangle, circle, left, right, triangle. Here, he'd be juggling combos like an Injustice, but then his hammer would hold off other irrelevant extras. Additionally, Marvel finally got to show us the true raw power of Thor. Even though the Thor vs Hulk fight was short, it was still extremely entertaining. We got to see him draw actual lightning force into his punches, which then resulted in thunderous shockwaves. The part where Thor turns into a Super Saiyan God and takes on a bunch of CGI skeletons was just Thor heaven. It also kind of got me thinking about Mulan for some reason.
You must be swift as a coursing river.
The visual effects for the most part were great. There were a few green screens that were a little bit noticeable. Some of the shading of the skyline background seemed sort of off with the actors on screen. That's just like the 1% of the total of them. I didn't have that much of a connection to Scourge throughout the entirety of the movie. I mean, he had a typical character arc. He's constantly forgot about, he turns rogue because evil person sees use in him, he switches sides last minute, and then he just dies. What I'm getting at is that he's just not unique. He's like one of those gamer tags you just auto-generate online. Loopy Monkeys 673. There was an attempt to humanize him, but I just couldn't feel that connection the film wanted me to feel. Also, Surtur only served two purposes for this film. He started it, and then he ended it. That's fine, I guess. I think they had their plate full with the development of Hela and Valkyrie, so it's understandable. I look forward to seeing him in future films, unless he just won't show up again, then Lamo rip. Surtur tombstone piledrived his fiery sword on top of Hela's head, presumably fulfilling some sort of death of Hela prophecy, I think. She may or may not come back for Infinity War. She could replace that death character from the original source material, but as of right now, I'm not sure. I hope she comes back. It'd be a waste of a great actress if she didn't. One tiny thing I guess I could add was that Hulk's ability to speak in near full sentences now is barely even explained. You could piece things together as to why he could do it, but it was a little jarring at first and did take a while to get used to. Nonetheless, I still really loved this movie. What really caught me by surprise was the huge twist that Hela is actually the firstborn of Odin and was supposed to take the throne after he died. Oh yeah, Odin dies by the way. I know she was some sort of daughter of Loki in some weird timeline, but it was just such a what the hell moment. Because if she was telling the truth about the past, then Odin was a dick too way back when. She was going on about how he promoted her destructive nature at one point, and then one day he just said, you know what, I need some drama. And then he just throws her into the Shadow Realm for a few millennia for everyone else to suffer later. That was just fun to think about. Thor Ragnarok also crushes every fan theory out there about Hela ever possessing the Soul Stone. That includes me, by the way. That was #1 on my top 12 places it could be list. There are still those chattering that Marvel never debunked Heimdall ever having it, so it could still be with him, but they never confirmed it either. I could see him having it, but to be honest, I don't know anymore. It could actually be in Wakanda next year. Maybe that's how he connects to the Panther gods and old Black Panther souls or something fancy like that. Or maybe not. Maybe it could be the last thing Thanos is looking for in Infinity War. On the subject of Thanos, we also got a glimpse of what was most likely his ship in the mid-credit scene towering over the Asgardian plain. For those who saw the Infinity War trailer, we saw that the footage opens with Thor floating in the middle of space and sticking onto the Guardian's ship's windshield. Thanos probably broke that thing down and has sent everyone drifting off everywhere. Or maybe just Thor. Maybe he just kicks Thor off because favoritism, I guess. The other post-credit scene was cool too. I haven't talked about Odin throughout this entire video yet, wow. He really feels like a third wheel this time around. In the other Thor films, he was indeed a supporting role, but here it was like he was a supporting role. Anthony Hopkins was great, but he barely had any screen time, so I'm just counting him as a super cameo role. The reveal of Stanley being the guy who ends up cutting Thor's hair had me in tears. Also, Doctor Strange was said to have an appearance in this movie since a year ago, but we just didn't know to what capacity it would be. I didn't expect him to be in it that much, but even then it was still less than what I expected. The two played off each other really well, and I especially loved the whole Loki bit where he was falling for half an hour in that one LSD place. ScarJo sort of had an uncredited cameo in Ragnarok. Not really. They simply just reused the Age of Ultron clip where she's trying to calm Hulk down in the old Quinjet. But hey, it still counts for something. And finally, Jason Bourne himself showed up in here as a bootleg Loki and a Shakespearean recap of Thor the Dark World. It was so cringy and terrible, it was great. Let's get a little more into Easter eggs now. The fact that they actually addressed the whole plot hole where there were 2 Infinity Gauntlets was really unexpected. I never thought about it until Hela and Scourge went down to Odin's vault. It just had me thinking like, oh yeah, wasn't there an Infinity Gauntlet on Asgard? And wherever Thanos is? Turns out, Marvel easily just retconned that by having Hela just say it was fake. The Tesseract was shown in the vault as well, but it's presumably with Loki now, since he managed to end up in the Asgardian ship somehow, with very little time to escape Asgard before it exploded. Thor had an umbrella to disguise his hammer, close enough to that walking stick he had in the comics, which he used to transform into Thor by slamming it onto the ground. Natalie Portman's Jane Foster was briefly mentioned after Thor took a selfie with his fans in New York. Tony Stark was referenced to quite a bit, especially when Banner was given his clothes to escape nudity. The first Avengers was paid homage to, when Hulk did the exact same wrestling maneuvers he did to Loki, to Thor. And last, but certainly the best one in my book, was when Thor hilariously mimicked Black Widow's lines to try and calm the Hulk down.
Hey, big guy. Sun's getting real low.
97% of the audience didn't really buy into that love relationship between Banner and Romanoff in Age of Ultron, and the way they said, you know what, we don't either, was the best way they could have possibly approached things. Thanks to Hela, Thor also has an eye patch now. That's most likely a reference to a comic book I don't know about. Ultimately, Thor Ragnarok was a fantastic work of art, and it's easily the best Thor film to date. It had all the humor, action, and adventure you're looking for in a Thor movie. The Hulk and Thor dynamic was spot on, the new additions were given the best treatment I think Marvel could have possibly given them, and even though it's over 2 hours long, it felt like I spent only 30 minutes in there. And that's saying something. This one is the first movie I'm giving this rating to. I have to say, Thor Ragnarok is Oscar-worthy. You deserve a reward, bro. By the way, that's not in the literal sense. That's just my highest rating in my rating system. I wasn't sure if I liked it more than Spider-Man Homecoming at first. I rewatched Homecoming again, and in my opinion, I enjoyed Ragnarok a whole lot more. Don't misinterpret what I'm saying. Homecoming was still good, but I think the Spider-Man fatigue has gotten to me a bit. I'd put Thor 3 above Homecoming and Guardians 2, as I'd say it's the best Marvel Cinematic Universe movie of this year. But who cares what I think? My thoughts don't matter. It's yours that does. What do you think of Thor Ragnarok? Did you love it? Maybe you hated it. Let me know in the comments below, and tell me how you rank the MCU movies that came out this year. Anyways, y'all, that's my time for today. If you liked this video, then be sure to hit that like and subscribe button. Also, don't forget to follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And for more of my videos, just click right here.